Today we're making Oriental Khalta rice, or Roz bil Khalta. Like the lamb leg recipe, this is the kind of dish you'd serve at a feast. It's topped with something called a Khalta, which can be translated as a mixed topping. There's a lot of different variants of this throughout the Middle East, but they all contain 4 elements: rice, meat, nuts and fruit. For this Egyptian one, we'll be toasting and caramelizing our rice, then we'll be making a Khalta with plump sultanas, toasted almonds and delicious chicken liver. Hey everyone, I'm Obi, a home cook who wants to get you cooking authentic and delicious Middle Eastern food at home. So I've shown you a few rice dishes in the past, but nothing quite like this. This has a perfect balance of sweet and savoury flavours that make it great for the festive period. Although it's a side dish, it usually occupies a prominent place on the table, and it's mostly served alongside a large roast. To take it to the next level, I've got a few techniques I'll show you that will make the liver absolutely delicious and give the rice a deep complex flavour. With that said, let's jump right in and make it. Let's start off by getting the simpler elements of the dish out of the way. If you aren't a fan of sultanas, I'd still recommend trying them in this dish as their sweetness contrasts really well with the other flavours. We'll be using golden sultanas in this rice, but some people use raisins instead. First we have to rehydrate them so that they plump up and are softer in the final dish. To do that, add 1 cup of sultanas to a bowl filled with room temperature water and allow them to sit for about 1 hour. When an hour has passed, you can drain and rinse them. As you can see, after soaking, they've plumped up a little. Now when we boil these in the rice, they will expand even more until they eventually resemble the grapes they once were. Set them aside while we move on to the almonds. For our crunchy element, we'll be using toasted almonds in this dish. I've got 1.5 cups of whole blanched almonds, though in some countries they use pine nuts, walnuts or cashews instead. Now to get at their soft inner kernel, we're going to slice the almonds in half. It's a slow job, but it stops the almonds from being too crunchy in the final dish. To do that, just lay your almonds on their side and find the approximate halfway point, then slice down through it. Do the same for all of your almonds until you are left with a pile like this. Here's what my almonds looked like once split in half, and don't worry, it's fine if some of them break into smaller pieces. To toast the almonds, I've lined a baking sheet with foil, onto which I'll pour out the halved almonds and evenly spread them out, making sure to give them room so that they aren't overlapping. When your tray looks like this, they can go into a 180°C or 350°F oven to bake for 8 to 12 minutes. Keep a very close eye on them as they change colour all of a sudden, and when they reach this light golden shade, pull them out of the oven. I recommend immediately removing them from the tray as they will continue to cook using residual heat. Next up we'll make toasted rice, and this will give the dish a nuttier flavour and darker colour than regular rice. We'll start off with the ritual of washing our rice. I'm using 3 cups of medium grain Egyptian rice, though something like Calrose would be a great substitute for it. We'll basically place our rice in some water and agitate it, then throw out the murky water and repeat until the water runs clean. This will stop it from clumping up when cooked. As you can see, washing the rice actually made the grains smaller and brighter, and that's because it removed a layer of dull surface starch. So once washed, we should go ahead and start toasting the rice straight away. If you let the rice dry out before toasting it, it's more likely to break when cooked. To help the rice brown, we'll add some melted butter to it, so take 3 tablespoons and melt them until completely liquefied. Then mix it onto the rice until it has all been evenly coated in butter. Next up, it should go into a baking dish and be spread out into a single even layer. I had to split mine into 2 batches so the oven dish wasn't overly full, but you should try to have it no more than 3 grains deep in the thickest parts. Once your tray is ready, it should go into a preheated 180°C or 350°F oven to bake for 30 to 40 minutes. Every 10 minutes you should pull it out and give it a thorough mix to ensure that it evenly browns. When about 40 minutes has passed, my rice reached this beautiful light golden stage, and that was when I pulled it out of the oven. You can use this toasted rice in any rice dish when you want a more complex and nuttier flavour. For the Egyptian Khalta, we'll be making a liver topping with onions, though in some places they use mincemeat instead. To make it, we'll first start by dicing 2 large onions, or 6 small ones, into a medium dice. These will be cooked down and form the base of the sauce for our liver. When diced, you should be left with pieces about this big. For the liver, we want to cut it into bite-sized pieces, so depending upon the size of your chicken livers, cut them into 3, 4 or 5 pieces. I'm going to be using 1 kilogram or 35 ounces of chicken liver here. In Egypt, the livers are usually sold together with the chicken hearts, which I find add a great texture to the final dish. So if you can get hold of some of them, I'd recommend adding a few ounces. When cutting the liver, keep an eye out for any veiny bits and make sure to remove them as they don't cook well. Once they've all been chopped, you'll have a pile of bite-sized liver pieces like this. Now we'll do something that is a bit controversial, but 100% authentic to the Middle Eastern kitchen, and that's soaking our chicken livers in water. I never wash my poultry or red meat, however when it comes to offal, it can sometimes have a funky smell. That usually comes from blood trapped within the organ, so to get rid of it, the solution is to give the liver a quick bath in water and vinegar. I just swirl the livers around the bowl and then let them sit for 3 to 5 minutes before pouring out the water and draining them. As someone who is against the washing of poultry because of its danger, I would say this is the one exception I have, as it can make a difference with offal. Once drained, they'll have discoloured quite a bit. Set the bowl aside and clean up well so we can finally start with the cooking. We'll start off by making the caramelized rice, as it will take a while to steam. Place a heavy bottomed pot on the stove over a medium-high heat, then add in 4 tablespoons of sugar. Wait a few minutes and very slowly the sugar will start to melt into a syrup. Once you notice the syrup start to change colour, mix in any sugar which has not yet dissolved. Then keep a close eye on the caramel that forms and continue to mix it, because what we want to do is burn it ever so slightly. It will go from yellow to amber to dark brown and then foam up. Once you get the slightest hint of a burnt caramel smell, add in about 100 ml or 3.3 fluid ounces of stock and dissolve the caramel in it. If you can get hold of a bone broth for this, it will really make a difference to the flavour, but otherwise just use any regular stock. Once the caramel is thinned out, you can add in all of the toasted rice from earlier, and then toss in the soaked sultanas as well. Then you'll add in 3 teaspoons of salt and half a teaspoon of black pepper. Add in some stock and stir the pot to get everything mixed together, then turn the heat up to high. Now you want to top the pot up with stock so that it's about 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch above the surface of the rice. We're using more water than usual because the sultanas will absorb quite a lot. Let the pot come to a light boil and then cover it with a tight lid. The pot should then boil undisturbed for about 5 minutes until the boiling sound stops. When that happens, open the pot and check that the water has evaporated, then turn the heat down to low and set a timer for 20 minutes, making sure to cover the pot once more. I'd really recommend not stirring your rice here, as it can easily break if you do. When the 20 minutes are up, open the pot and your rice is done. I had a bit of trouble with this rice and it took some attempts to get it perfect, but what I will say is that you'll need more liquid than regular rice, and whatever you do, don't stir the rice after you've let it come to a boil. When it's cooked, you can fluff it up with a fork, but don't use a spoon or spatula. Also, if your rice forms a white rim around the outside of the pot like mine, don't mix it in. That's all broken rice caused by the toasting process. It's perfectly edible, but it just doesn't look great in the final dish. While the rice is steaming, you'll want to cook the liver so that it can be served straight away. Start off by placing a pan on high heat on the stove and adding in 1 tablespoon of butter. While it's melting, take 2 small pieces of mastic and add them to the butter. Then when the butter is hot and bubbly, add in your chopped liver. Once it's in the pan, let it pan fry for 2 to 3 minutes until browned on one side, then stir the pan to get your liver pieces flipped over. Let it sit for another 2 minutes and then stir it again, and repeat this process one more time until your liver is about 70% browned. When that happens, add in the chopped onion to the pan. Follow that up with 2 teaspoons of salt and half of a teaspoon of black pepper, then work it all into the liver so everything is mixed well. Let that cook on medium heat, stirring occasionally until the onions have softened and wilted, which should take about 10 more minutes. When the time is up, check your liver for doneness, which for me is a soft and smooth texture. Don't cook this for more than 20 minutes total, otherwise the liver will end up gritty. The last thing to do is to reduce the liquid in the pan into a pan sauce until it's just thick enough to coat the liver and onions. Once it's well reduced, your liver is done. I'd recommend doing this while the rice is cooking or when it's finished so that you eat it straight from the pan. Last thing to do before assembly is fry our toasted almonds in a small amount of butter until fragrant and glossy. Then drain them out onto a paper towel lined plate. With all the components ready, it's time to plate the dish. Start off by fluffing your rice with a fork and placing it on your serving dish. When you've got a nice pile, take the steaming hot liver and add it onto the rice, making sure to include plenty of the onions and the pan sauce. Finally, you'll top it with the fried almonds and your dish is complete. Alright, so it is taste test time. Let's see how this turned out. I'll let you in on a secret. I absolutely hated liver until I first tried this dish, and eating it now is no surprise I converted. The flavours of this are extremely well balanced. You get a lot of savoury, earthy and mineral flavours from the liver, but none of them are overpowering. With the rice you get the bitterness of the burnt caramel and the nuttiness of the toasted rice, then little pops of sweetness and fruitiness from the sultanas. Together it's a wonderful combination that makes for a perfect mouthful of food. Like I mentioned, you could swap out the liver if you aren't a fan of it, but I think it goes great in this dish. I really hope you give this one a try soon or even serve it at Christmas dinner. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like or comment and share it with your friends. And if you make this, be sure to send me some photos. As usual, the full recipe is in the description box below, and I'll be back next week with another recipe.